Welcome to the 2025 MotoGP season review. It all got underway with a first ever season launch in Bangkok, where the streets filled with thousands of fans. There were plenty of changes in the lineup, with rookies Fermin Aldeguer, Somkiat Chantra and reigning Moto2 champion Igura stepping up, whilst in KTM, Pedro Acosta became a factory rider. Pecco Bagnaia had a new teammate. Marc Marquez was back as a factory rider, this time for Ducati. He was in search of his 7th MotoGP crown. Another major change was reigning world champion Jorge Martin with the #1 at Aprilia, but it was a pre-season to forget. A massive crash at the Sepang test after just 14 laps meant he missed testing, and a further injury whilst training saw him out of the opening rounds. Soon enough, the lights went out and 2025 was game on. Marc Marquez got the first whole shot in Buriram sprint, but just look at Igura sweeping around the outside at turn 1 to get into P4. Pre-season testing signs suggested an emphatic performance by Marquez, and that's exactly what we got. It was a Marquez 1-2, Pecco 3rd, but celebrations all round at Trackhouse, Igura P4. In the Grand Prix itself, drama for the 93. He gave up his lead on lap 7 to make sure that he was adhering to the tyre pressure limit, slotting in behind his brother before stalking him for the remainder of the Grand Prix. And with 4 laps to go, he hit the front at the final corner, and that would be that. Marc Marquez opened with a double. It was a double 1-2 for the brothers, with Alex 2nd and Pecco once again 3rd. More delight at Trackhouse as Igura claimed 5th. But in Parc Ferme, it was a proud Papa Marquez, and this was just the start. In the championship, 37 points, perfect so far for Marc. Termas de Rio Hondo in Argentina, passion oozing on MotoGP's return to South America. Into turn 1 for the first time, and whilst Marc got the whole shot over Alex, drama behind as Aprilia's difficult start to 25 continued. Bezzecchi hitting the back of 21 world champion Fabio Quartararo. At the front, Alex Marquez had snatched P1 from his brother, whilst Franco Morbidelli was on the charge, getting Pecco for P3. Wide at turn 4, Marc left the door open for his brother to come through to take the lead. The championship leader was pushing hard to take P1 back, almost too hard. Big moment at turn 11, saved by his usual cat-like reactions. With 5 laps to go, he got the job done and hit the front at turn 4, and he would never look back. Franco Morbidelli was riding well in P3, but on the last lap, it was his VR46 teammates, Fabio Di Gianantonio, who pushed his way into P5 and getting the better of Johann Zarco. Another Marquez 1-2 at the front, however, with Marc remaining unbeaten in 2025, a 90th win across all classes, equaling MotoGP legend Angel Nieto. P4 for Pecco, not the positions he'd been used to in previous years.
This is not my position, and will not be my position all the season.
MotoGP went stateside for round 3 at Cota, just outside of Texas state capital Austin. An injured Jorge Martin was in attendance as his comeback got closer, but Pecco's words from Termas were correct, and he came out fighting in the sprint. Pushing his way into P1, Marquez punched him straight back at turn 8 in a blockbuster opening lap. In the final sector, it was 3 abreast into turn 19. Marc versus Alex versus Pecco in a heavyweight fight at the front. And somehow at the end of it, the 93 was still P1. But it was all triggered by another huge moment for Marc. Just how does he save them? He held on to extend the winning run and his championship lead to 19 points. In Austin, they say it's all about keeping it weird, and that's certainly how Sunday went. A wet race, Quartararo crashed on the sighting lap to the grid, but managed to get back in time. Meanwhile, Marc was planning something. Not convinced with the wet tyre selection, he bolted just moments before the warm-up lap to get onto his spare bike, which had the dry setup. With the majority of riders following him, the start was delayed. As they ran in one direction, Tech 3 KTM's Maverick Vinales ran in the other. Total chaos before going green. Then moments before the lights were due to go out again, Vinales had yet more problems and was wheeled off the grid. When we did get underway, a similar story to before, Mark grabbing a whole shot, whilst the rest gave chase. At turn 12 on lap 4, Pecco made his move for P2, however, getting ahead of Alex Marquez, but the gap was nearly a second and a half to race leader Mark. However, it wasn't to be. The first blot on his copybook of the season, the 93, went down at turn 4. Touching a white line in a tricky, damp but drying conditions, the championship leader was on the deck. He remounted, but eventually retired, and a first DNF for the 93 in red. Bagnaia held on to take a first win of 2025 ahead of new championship leader Alex Marquez, whilst Fabio Di Giannantonio was on the podium just a few weeks on from a broken collarbone and an off-season spent recovering from shoulder surgery. For Pecco, he couldn't see anyone around him. A fine ride and 25 points bagged. One point in the gap, but the 73 led the MotoGP standings for the first time ever. Under the lights in Qatar at Lusail, round 4 was upon us. Marc Marquez bounced back from his Cota crash with pole, whilst Fabio Quartararo made it onto the front row. The big news was Jorge Martin's injury layoff was over as he returned, whilst America's GP winner Bagnaia lined up in 11th after a Q2 crash. Following victory in the sprints, Mark got the whole shot again into turn 1 ahead of brother Alex. It didn't stay too friendly for long, with contact on the exit. That's allowed Morbidelli to hit the front, but just look at how close the brothers came. Frankie had bolted at the front, whilst more drama behind as Alex Marquez battled with Fabio Di Giannantonio before clattering into him at turn 12, and that earned him a long lap penalty. Pecco got ahead of his teammate Mark for P2, and whilst Alex served his long lap penalty, Maverick Vinales was on a mission in P4, his best showing so far with KTM. Pecco dropped back out of the podium places as Mark and Maverick charged forwards. Despite having led for 10 laps, Frankie Morbidelli soon found himself in P3 as the second half of the Grand Prix began. Further back, disaster for Jorge Martin. Crashing at turn 12, it was not the comeback he had hoped for. He was struck by Fabio Di Giannantonio, who simply had nowhere to go. The reigning champion suffered a pneumothorax and 11 fractured ribs, and would now not be back until the second half of the season. In the battle for the lead, Vinales had gone wide at turn 6, letting Marquez back through, and the 93 began to edge clear out front. Eventually, he took a third Grand Prix win of the season and a first victory in the desert since 2014. Vinales, P2, or was he? Despite having not finished in the top 10 at all in the opening 3 GPs of the season and putting in an inspired ride for second on the road, an incorrect tyre pressure meant he was dropped to P14, promoting Pecco to second and Morbidelli to P3. 18 points, older brother Mark was now ahead of Alex going to Europe. After his scary crash in Qatar, Jorge Martin was now out of hospital as the MotoGP family rocked up at Jerez for the first European round of the season. Quartararo had snatched pole position and meant business when the lights went out. El Diablo got the whole shot in the sprint, bundling Marquez out of the way at turn 1 and 2 dukes it out in the opening couple of laps. Until on lap 2 at turn 6, El Diablo tucked the front and hit the gravel. So much potential, but no points on Saturday. The home fans got what they wanted. A Marquez 1-2 as Mark headed home Alex with Pecco P3 again. But would that repeat itself for the Grand Prix on Sunday? A massive attendance that was already flooding in before 6 a.m. in the morning. There's no place like Jerez on a Sunday. A fly past over the grid. The spectacle was about to be pretty wild on track too. The Pedrosa corner on lap 1, and Alex Marquez somehow threads the eye of the needle between brother Mark and his teammate Pecco, dropping back to P4. Meanwhile, up ahead of him on the track, the Ducati Lenovo stars were going head-to-head in shades of 2024's epic Jerez showdown. Shoulder to shoulder, bar to bar, MotoGP at its very best as the two swapped places and traded paint in a frantic opening lap. Just look at how close they got on the exit of the stadium section. Oh, have some of that. It was disaster at turn 8 a couple of laps later though. For the second time in 3 GPs, Marc Marquez fell on a Sunday, and this time in front of his home crowd. Over 101,000 fans now with their hopes pinned on younger brother Alex. Mark's very much done and well dusted. Alex meant business, dispatching Pecco at the final corner on lap 4 before pouncing on Quartararo at turn 1 on lap 11. And he held on. Proof that younger brothers can win. Alex Marquez took his first MotoGP victory and with it the championship lead, with scenes that would get any fans on their feet. The first brothers to win in MotoGP, the pictures do the talking.
When I saw it, especially Mark crashing on 8, I say, Alex, today is your day.
Leading the championship by only a point, but a lead's a lead, right? The middle of May can only mean one thing, the French GP at Le Mans. And for the first time in MotoGP history, more than 300,000 fans packed into the venue across the weekend. But could either Quartararo or Johann Zarco live up to their homecoming expectations? Fabio delivered the goods in qualifying with pole, and despite being beaten to P1 at turn 1, he came thundering back ahead of Marc Marquez at the first chicane, and he was making a break for it. Whilst behind, there would be trouble for Pecco. At the start of lap 2, he fell from 4th, a huge dent in his title aspirations. More elbow-to-elbow action at the front on lap 6 as Quartararo and Marquez fought over P1. El Diablo with a perfect cutback to hold on to that lead at his home sprint. It wouldn't be for long though. Marquez forcing his way through later in the lap before Fabio was then under attack from Alex Marquez and his Gresini teammate, rookie Fermin Aldeguer, who was also able to come through on the number 20. It would be another Marquez 1-2, but this time it was Aldeguer who claimed 3rd and was emerging as a bit of a star. A new look sprint podium, but the Grand Prix would be completely different. Wet, dry, wet, dry. The weather couldn't make its mind up, and neither could the riders. They started the warm-up lap on dry tyres. They came in to change to wet with the rain coming down. Then, after a short delay, some riders went back out on wet, but then came back in at the end of the sighting lap to change back to dries, getting them a double long lap penalty. And if you're keeping up, the fun doesn't stop there. In the Grand Prix itself, all kinds of chaos at turn 1. Enea Bastianini got it all wrong, clashing into Pecco, whilst Mir collided with Johann Zarco, sending the 2020 World Champion to the floor and leaving the home hero, who was already on wet tyres on a drying circuit, at the back of the field. At the front, Quartararo was leading, but was one of the riders to have a double long lap penalty, along with the Marquez brothers, who were likewise right in contention in the early stages. At the final corner, Quartararo fell from P2 and KTM's Brad Binder from P3. Then the rain started again, and all those who had changed to dry tyres had taken double long laps and were now in the pit lane to change back to wet. And then somehow, after it had all shaken out, Zarco was leading. He started on the wet, avoided long laps and a trip through pit lane to change tyres. The others couldn't see which way he went. From more than half a minute down on lap 5 to finishing nearly 20 seconds ahead of the opposition. Only Johann Zarco could win that way. In front of his parents, who were attending a Grand Prix for the first time ever, Zarco made history. The first French rider to win the home GP and MotoGP since 1954, the Frenchman was back to backflipping ways. In the standings, Alex's Sunday DNF and Mark's P2 sees the 93's lead extend to 22. Round 7 came from the UK in Silverstone, and once again, Quartararo did the business in qualifying. The Frenchman may have got the drop at the start as the Marquez brothers battled behind, but it was Mark who hit the front at Stowe at the end of the first lap. But a mistake at the start of the second lap meant that Alex could seize the initiative, whilst behind, the battle really was starting to rage. Pecco had his hands full with Fabio Di Gianantonio, and the number 49 moved into P3, pushing Pecco off the podium. Out front, and deadlock was broken as Alex Marquez became the first rider to defeat brother Mark in a Tissot sprint. In the Grand Prix on Sunday, it was Alex Marquez who grabbed the whole shot, but it didn't last long for Saturday's sprint's winner as he fell at turn 1, his GP over before it really began. Elsewhere, disaster for Morbidelli and wildcard Aleix Espargaro, who tangled at the final chicane at Vale. And the stars continued to fall as Marc Marquez once again found himself down. However, a red flag due to track contamination after Morbidelli and Espargaro's crash meant that due to it being thrown within 3 laps, all riders were eligible for a restart, and the Marquez brothers were given a second chance. On the restart, Bagnaia snatched a whole shot, but just look at Quartararo, majestic through the opening few turns and grabbing back the lead at turn 3. The 2021 world champion stormed away, and at the end of lap 2, his lead was over 2 seconds ahead of Miller, Zarco, Pecco and Marc Marquez, both the Ducatis having to fight to come through. And they were struggling. A mistake at Copse from both of them before Pecco crashed altogether at Luffield. Disaster for Ducati in a bizarre British GP. Out front, Quartararo had 5 seconds over Marco Bezzecchi, who had come through from as low as P10 on lap 1 to P2 by lap 6. Making waves after his error at Copse, Marc Marquez was coming through on brother Alex. But then, the cruelest of luck for Fabio, a ride height device failure on lap 12 ended his charge to what looked like a certain win, and the heartbreak for the Frenchman was clear. Whilst out front, Bezzecchi was doing the business, with teammate Martin out injured and also seemingly trying to get out of his Aprilia contract. This was a statement ride from Bez and the Noale factory. It was Marquez versus Morbidelli for P3, with Zarco a safe second. A battle that went right the way down to the wire. Just look how close it got between the 93 and the 21. Meanwhile, Aprilia got a first win of 2025, Bez's first since India in 2023, and the 5th different winner from the last 5 GPs. Following the unpredictability of the last 5, normal service was resumed in the Marquez brothers' backyard of Aragon. A 1-2 in the sprint, they aim to do it again in the Grand Prix. Behind them, Brad Binder was running in P5 in what was a stronger showing in the drive, but crashed at the Carlos Checo corner. And he wasn't the only one. Quartararo fell from the top 10, as did Viñales, with 4 to go. The big battle on the track was between Morbidelli and Aldeguer on the penultimate lap. And despite the rookie Spaniard showing his nerves of steel, Frankie made it to 5th. Out front, Mark was back on top ahead of Alex, and for the first time in Grand Prix history, two brothers finished 1-2 in a Grand Prix on their home soil. Mugello, always spectacular, and wow, did it deliver in 2025. The sprint started with Mark re-engaging his launch control device, but by the time he looked up, the sprint was already go. Home hero Bagnaia got the whole shot ahead of Alex Marquez, but soon the gloves would come off between him and Pecco. A big crash at turn one, however, Zarco and Binder out. Already rushing up the inside of Quartararo, Marquez was keen to make up for lost time at the start, and soon it was a three-way fight. Raging on lap after lap. It took until lap 4 for the 93 to get himself into P1, but he was really having to work for it, dispatching teammates Pecco and then his brother at San Donato. He'd lead the rest of the sprint in what was becoming a very familiar podium. And despite the win, not all Ducati fans were warming to Mark in red, something team boss Davide Todozzi was quite keen to correct. If the sprint was the teaser, the Grand Prix was the full blockbuster of a movie. Head-to-head from lights out in a special Renaissance livery. The factory Ducati stars battled hard and left nothing on the table. Listen to the Mugello crowd. Swapping paint and trading blows at every opportunity, just like in Jerez. This lap 3 collision between them, the stuff the fans have been waiting for. And even Hollywood star Keanu Reeves' reaction got him and every one of us doing the same. And this was just the start at one of the greatest racetracks anywhere in the world. MotoGP put on one of the most remarkable of shows in front of a huge Mugello audience. It went on lap after lap. And down towards turn 1, Alex Marquez got it done this time around. Or did he? The two factory bikes coming back underneath him. Pecco looking to try and come through to lead his home GP. Only one win so far in 2025. He wanted to make it 2 in Italy. On lap 7, 3 abreast into turn 1, and Alex Marquez was now in the lead. But as Mark came through on lap 9, that would be it. And the battle had been won by the 93. Behind, not the ideal Sunday for Viñales, who was taken out by Morbidelli at turn 4. And as you can see, was far from impressed. In the closing stages, a slightly cleaner pass from the other VR46 Ducati of the Gian Antonio saw him pinch third from Pecco, but there was nothing that could stop Marquez, who took honours at Mugello for the first time since 2014. He extended Ducati's winning run at the track to 4 for the first time ever. Alex second, Digia a home P3.
Super special day. Italian bike, Italian team in Italian circuit. Super special.
The championship lead for Mark, now 40 over Alex, as Assen waited at the end of June. Assen, it never fails to bring the excitement, and 2025 was no different. Another Marquez 1-2 in the sprint in the same order as it had been for most of the season. The Grand Prix on Sunday, though, a little bit different. Bagnaia got the initial upper hand over Alex Marquez before Mark managed to find his feet in P3, soon to be up into P2 and ahead of his brother. At the end of lap 5, the number 93 hit the front, whilst the 73 had dropped behind Bezzecchi and Acosta down to 5th. And 73 and 37 went head-to-head. After this little bit of contact at turn 5, there was even more down the back straight, leaving Alex on the floor and with a fractured left hand. The incident reviewed, but no further action taken. A disaster in the Netherlands for Alex Marquez. His championship really taking a beating. Bezzecchi was back in form, and despite getting into P2, he couldn't quite get on top of Marc Marquez. A third win on the spin, whilst Pecco clinched P3 at the Cathedral of Speed. Round 11 and the halfway points of the season at the Sachsenring in Germany. Wet weather for the sprint, and whilst he got pole in the whole shot, Marc Marquez made a mess of turn 1, dropping down to 5th. And this gave Marco Bezzecchi a chance to break for freedom out front. With 6 to go, the 93 pushed his way ahead of Quartararo for P2. And despite a 1.5 second gap up to Bez out front, it took until the last lap for Marc to get into P1. But he was forced to fight for it. He would go on to resist Bezzecchi's threat to reign in the rain, whilst Quartararo made it 3 manufacturers on the podium in 3rd. It was gloves off on Sunday at the Sachsenring. Marquez kept it all neat and tidy at turn 1 this time, and that really was that in terms of the P1 battle. He cleared off, but it was Gian Antonio who was on the charge. However, the main fight was for 3rd between Alex Marquez, Bezzecchi and Acosta, who really were taking lumps out of each other at the tight and twisty Sachsenring. But Acosta didn't stay in the fight for too long. He crashed at turn 3 with a strong result going begging. He'd be in good company though. A whole host of crashes, whilst Marc Marquez led the way out front. The first one was Gian Antonio out of P2, tucking the front at turn 1. And he was shortly joined, a few laps later, by Marco Bezzecchi. The 2 riders giving chase to the 93 out front, seeing their German GP hopes end in the turn 1 gravel. Remaining the Sachsenring king, Marc Marquez aura-farmed his way to victory ahead of Alex and Pecco, but the German GP was very much one off attrition, just 10 finishes. Round 12 and the reigning champion was back, and with some big statements.
Finally happy to be here, to be back on my MotoGP. And yeah, also I can say happy to say that I will continue in Aprilia for 2026.
With all of that cleared up on Thursday, Martin could turn his attention to the track. Well, in the sprint, hitting the front early on, Marquez got ahead of teammate Pecco, whilst Quartararo was up inside the podium places early on. For Pecco, however, the sprint started to go wrong, as he had to yield track position for a tyre pressure concern. But that made for an intriguing end. Marc, Acosta and in-form Enea Bastianini, Pecco and Fabio Quartararo all in contention. But it would be the 93 who took the sprint on MotoGP's return to Brno. Bezzecchi was right at the front again on Sunday in Brno after a difficult sprint. He led the dueling Ducatis of Marc and Pecco, whilst Acosta was right there, keeping a watching brief in 4th. Whilst one Marquez fought for victory, the other one was having a nightmare. Alex skittling Joan Mir on lap 2, both of their GPs being ended before they really got going. A lap later, and the Jaws music was sounding for both Pecco and Bezzecchi. Acosta came through into 3rd on the 63, who was starting to have a tough time of things, before Marc attacked Bez for P1 on lap 8. Starting the second half of 2025, just how he started the first half, Marc was seemingly untouchable, but at least Bez was now emerging as one of his main challengers in the Grand Prix. P1 for Marc, Bez second, Acosta third in a first podium of the season. Further back, a heroic P7 for Martin on his first GP back since injury. Whilst Acosta, that first rostrum meant quite a lot for him and KTM.
Was a really long journey to come back here. You only have to see how much we was sailing at the beginning of the year, you know, and see all these orange people now. Maybe they lose one of my best races in MotoGP.
In the championship, 120 points now was Marc Marquez's advantage. Austria and the Red Bull Ring. Plenty of goats in the house for round 13. As the lights went out on Saturday, Bagnaia got a terrible start, whilst Alex beat brother Marc to the whole shot and led the opening stages ahead of the 93, with Bezzecchi up there in third. After his poor start, however, Pecco was out with 6 laps remaining. Another sprint to forget for the Italian. With 5 to go, Marc took over at the front, and that is where he'd remain until the checkered flag. Behind the brothers, Acosta was third in KTM's home weekend. Getting underway on Grand Prix Sunday, Bezzecchi swept across Bagnaia's nose at turn 1 to gain track position, before Pecco found himself third by turn 3, teammate Marc coming through. The 93 had to work hard for it though, both of them side by side as they went down the back straight. Behind the battle of the Bologna Bullet, Acosta strong in P4, but ahead on lap 2 at turn 3, Marc found his way through, whilst brother Alex served a long lap penalty for his incidents with Mir in Brno. Jorge Martin's heights of Brno didn't follow him to the Red Bull Ring as he crashed at turn 7. It was starting to turn out not to be Martin's year. In the fight for P3, Acosta wasn't taking prisoners as he forced his way through on Bagnaia at the Jochen Rindt curve, briefly putting him P3 before Aldeguer fired through. At the front, Marquez passed Bezzecchi, but the Italian wasn't done just yet, retaliating into turn 6 with 9 laps remaining. Into turn 1 with 8 to go, Marc got the job done, but it didn't end there for Bez, because he was soon to be under attack from a hard-charging and fast-arriving Fermin Aldeguer. The rookie was closing in the closing stages, meaning Marc had to up his pace. The 93 maintained a 1-second advantage. Marquez, once again king of the castle, taking victory in MotoGP's 1000th race. MotoGP's first visit to Hungary since 1992 was met with the warmest of welcomes at the all-new Balaton Park circuit, just a stone's throw away from Central Europe's largest lake. But before the lights even went out on Sunday, Fabio Di Giannantonio was already swimming against the tide. A mechanical problem on the grid left him with no choice but to start from pit lane on his number 2 bike, leaving a space on the front row. As the lights did go out, Marquez was scrapping with Bezzecchi once again. Contact coming at turn 2. Luca Marini was a fast starter on the Honda, whilst Morbidelli was in the podium places, but just look how busy the opening couple of corners were. Later on lap 1, Bastianini fell from 4th, and as we all held our breath, everyone avoided him, and he was straight back on his feet. Then, bigger drama, as Alex Marquez fell, meaning his championship challenge really was fading. Brother Mark was working his way forwards, first getting ahead of Morbidelli before pursuing Bezzecchi. Acosta was next up to pass the number 21, and that was for P3 as the Italian started to drop back. But at the front, Mark made a first attempt at turn 1 to get ahead of the Aprilia's Bezzecchi, but it didn't work. A second would come at turn 5 at the end of the back straight. The same outcome, Bezzecchi getting the cutback and holding first. A third attempt at turn 1 on lap 11, this time good enough, and Mark would remain untouched for the rest of the race. Further back, Martin was on the charge, from down on the grid and up into P4 with just 5 laps to go. A heroic showing from the reigning champion. But at the flag, Marquez got it all done ahead of Acosta, who came through for P2, and Bezzecchi third. Aprilia celebrated in style, with Martin holding on to a vital and hard-earned fourth. In the championship, 175 points now, Mark ahead of Alex. Aiming to make up for his Balaton Park blunder, Alex Marquez was breaking away in Barcelona's sprint on Saturday, whilst behind it was a top speed battle between Ducati, Yamaha and KTM, with Marc Marquez getting the better of Quartararo and Acosta. Further back and in a bid to get into the points in the top 9, Aldeguer crashed, wiping out Marco Bezzecchi. And then, with just over 3 laps to go, the unthinkable. With over a second advantage, Alex Marquez crashed from the lead at turn 10, ending his home glory and gifting Mark a passage to P1. The wheels had really come off Alex's title charge. Mark won, Quartararo second, Gian Antonio third, and a 3-way fight for KTM, all going for fourth. With the sprint win, Ducati, Constructors' champions, with 7 to go. Balaton Park blunder, Catalonia sprint crasher. Surely it wouldn't be 3 in a row of the most unwanted kind for the younger Marquez. The brothers duked it out through the opening corners, neither wanting to give an inch to the other, side by side, through to turn 3. Further down the field, more Barcelona blues for Bezzecchi as he crashed at turn 1. Fabio Di Gianantonio joining him. On lap 4, the number 73 got through on the 93 at turn 1. And behind, there was an all KTM battle again as Bastianini came through on Acosta at the same corner as we approach the half-race distance. A fine ride from Bastianini. This was what we knew he was capable of. Out front, and a childhood dream achieved as Alex Marquez clinched a real home victory in Catalonia. A 1-2 for the brothers with Mark second, whilst Bastianini would take his only Sunday podium of the season, something that got incoming Tech 3 team owner Gunter Steiner pretty pleased. But the Marquez party was the headline. After being beaten by brother Alex in Barcelona, Mark was out to reassert himself in P1 at Misano. And in the sprint, he took over P1 at just half-race distance. He and Bezzecchi battling it out again. But his race lead didn't last long. He tucked the front at turn 15, and it was a hugely costly error. The unlikely title-clinching moment before the flyaways was now impossible. Bezzecchi would go on to capitalise to take a home sprints win, something that ex-boss and good friend Valentino Rossi was clearly very happy about. Alex Marquez second, Discia for VR46 in third. Another packed Grand Prix Sunday at Misano. Bezzecchi grabbed the whole shot at the front, whereas behind there was soon to be more drama, but this time for Pedro Acosta, who had a chain failure, ending his Grand Prix and making his feelings quite clear. Rough form continued for Bagnaia, crashing at Tramonto and out of Ducati's second home round of the year. It just wasn't the 63 season. At the front, Bezzecchi versus Marquez again. And as the Italian went wide at turn 8, the 93 zipped through. And despite a relentless pace, nothing could derail Marc, bouncing back to winning ways. And he had a celebration in mind for the partisan home crowd.
I gave my all. I wanted the victory so bad, to be honest.
It's true that looks like it's a matter of time and that we will achieve our main goal, but be calm.
Match point weekend for Marquez of the Marc variety in Japan. But off the line in the sprint and a big crash further back as Jorge Martin got it all wrong into turn 1, taking out teammate Marco Bezzecchi. Out of control and nowhere to go, it was straight to the scene of the crash. Back at the front, Marquez got the better of a rather impressive Joan Mir on a Honda at home at turn 10, and he went on to dismiss Pedro Acosta and KTM a couple of laps later at the very same corner. Out front and back on top, Bagnaia showed that when it's all working how he wants, he still can be unbeatable. Plenty of tension in the air on Sunday in Japan, the greatest sporting comeback in history on the verge of being completed. All Marc had to do was beat his brother Alex. It was another dream start for Pecco, who took the lead and checked out once again. The woes of previous rounds now seemingly very far away. Behind, having dropped to third, Marquez up into P2, whilst chasing both him and Acosta, Joan Mir. A first Honda podium now looking likely, as he got Acosta for third. Out front drama as Bagnaia's Ducati began smoking at various points of the circuit. Surely bad luck wouldn't stop him when he's already been looking the favourite all weekend. Onto the last lap, but Ducati won too. Pecco had it all done, but all eyes were on Marquez. The personal battle against injury, the numerous surgeries, perhaps never being able to win again. The move away from his beloved Honda family, and with one desire to fight for the title again. Marc Marquez, the 2025 MotoGP World Champion. The 93 back to being #1. And the greatest sporting comeback completed by one of sport's greatest athletes.
I did a big mistake on my career to come back too early, and then, you know, I fight, and I won again. So I'm on pace.
From red to gold, Marc Marquez's lead now insurmountable. Champion with 5 to go. The rather picturesque island of Lombok is usually laid back in a true island vibe. The MotoGP once again brought the festival for round 18. We were treated to a last lap to remember in the sprint as Bezzecchi hunted down Aldeguer. Looking for his first win in MotoGP, Aldeguer was so close that at turn 10 Bezzecchi got it done. Another solid performance from the Aprilia star, who had been a real force in the second half of the season. There was a true carnival vibe with a special grid performance. And believe me, that wouldn't be the only notable thing. A dramatic opening lap saw Bezzecchi and Marquez tangle, and the crash would have major repercussions. Bezzecchi was okay, the 93 season's over as he suffered a complicated shoulder injury with ligament damage. Meanwhile, on the track, Aldeguer was now race leader and looking to try and go one better than his sprint performance. He got ahead of Acosta, also in search of a maiden MotoGP win at turn 10. At the back of the field, however, Bagnaia was struggling. From the heights of victory in Japan, he was now on the floor at the final corner after falling off in Mandalika. The 63's woes were back. Meanwhile, after Honda's Japan podium, Luca Marini was in the fight for a rostrum again, this time with Acosta and Raul Fernandez, the latter of which got his elbows out. And that allowed Alex Rins to showcase himself in one of his best rides of the year, but he dropped back soon enough. Meanwhile, it was Acosta versus Alex Marquez out front. Nobody could catch Aldeguer, though. The 20-year-old had stolen the show, a rookie winner and the second youngest in MotoGP. Meanwhile, Marc Marquez was already on his way to get treatment back in Europe, not the end to his record break in 2025 he wanted. Heading to a land down under and Phillip Island, sprint saw Bezzecchi once again feature at half-race distance. This time it was a mistake at turn 10. Saw him running completely wide, allowing Fernandez to lead comfortably. But not for long, as the number 72 came back through with just 3 laps remaining. He'd pull away to head home in a Aprilia 1-2, whilst Acosta was again strong in third. Conditions were different on Sunday, and so would be the result. Bezzecchi had to serve a double long lap penalty for his crash with Marquez in Indonesia, and that released Raul Fernandez into P1. Fabio Di Gianantonio was on the charge too, up into P2, whilst Alex Marquez would soon come through as well. Bezzecchi trying to fight back through, coming past Acosta. However, after most had given up belief on him after a tough start to 2025, Raul Fernandez silenced his critics to give the American team a victory, thus meaning that every team on the MotoGP grid had, at some point over the years, won a Grand Prix. It was a tough flyaway stint from Bagnaia, but on Saturday in Malaysia, he was flawless. A return to the top step saw the 63 back to his best, whilst behind, Alex Marquez wrapped up second in the standings and Aldeguer Rookie of the Year. The 54 would later have his podium taken away due to tyre pressure infringements, but it didn't change anything. Still the best rookie in 2025. A packed-out Sunday Sepang crowd were in for a treat as the battle commenced straight away on lap 1. Alex Marquez coming through on Acosta before going after Pecco. And he pulled the same manoeuvre on lap 2, getting the job done. Bagnaia then had Acosta to deal with. He didn't let the KTM star have it easily, as whilst Acosta did manage to get through at turn 4, Bagnaia responded, and it would rock on like this for the rest of the lap. Ducati versus KTM, Bagnaia versus Acosta. This was the latest attempt, Acosta parking it up the inside, going wide, Bagnaia dropping it back across him. But Acosta never knows when he's beaten and would get the job done this time up the inside. That was for second. Then, as Marquez and Acosta pulled clear, disaster for Pecco with 3 to go, as a puncture took him out of third. Marquez was victorious ahead of Acosta, who was forced to wait again, whilst Joan Mir completed the podium for Honda. The flyaways were done, it was back to Europe for the final 2 rounds, and a fight for third place overall that was intensifying. Arguably one of the best sprints of the year, Portimao's roller coaster really was a joyride at the front. Acosta versus Bezzecchi before Marquez joined in. The number 73 blasting by down the front straight. But then it would be his turn to try and do what Pecco couldn't do in Malaysia, and that was temper Acosta, who, having seen Raul Fernandez and Fermin Aldeguer both take first victories in the last few GPs, was out to add his name to the list. An attempt at turn 3 at half-race distance, followed by another at turn 5. He was desperate to stay ahead. But it wasn't to be. Alex Marquez finally getting the job done as the battle continued, as he blasted on by down the front straight again in the closing stages. There was just nothing that Pedro Acosta could do that was going to stop Alex Marquez going for victory in Portimao on Saturday. Marquez held on. It was the closest sprint finish of the year, the closest finish of 2025, just over 1/10 of a second. On Sunday, there was plenty of emotion on the grid as Miguel Oliveira geared up for his final Grand Prix at home. We move into the World Superbike paddock for 2026. His wife and daughter joined him on the grid to say farewell. A true ambassador for the sport in Portugal. In the GP itself, Bezzecchi was leading as Marquez and Acosta were at it again. And whilst the gap extended out during the middle of the GP, Acosta got the deficit down in the closing stages, but it wasn't going to be enough to take P2. Bezzecchi victorious on Sunday for the first time since Silverstone, and now third in the standings ahead of sprint winner Marquez. Acosta on the box again in third and closing down Pecco for fourth overall. Before lights had even gone out for the final time in 2025, drama on the grid when Franco Morbidelli crashed into the back of wildcard Aleix Espargaro at the end of the warm-up lap. And when the lights did go out, more talking points on the track as Johann Zarco barreled through on Pecco, sending the Italian into the gravel and out of the GP. A fifth consecutive DNF on a Sunday for Bagnaia. Raul Fernandez was on the charge once again, as was Fabio De Gian Antonio. On the podium in Australia, he wanted to end this season strongly and got ahead of Acosta for third on the penultimate lap. Nobody could stop Bezzecchi though, as he made it back-to-back wins and an Aprilia 1-2, with Fernandez second. Digia took third, but it was Marco Bezzecchi who didn't just steal all of the show, but he was also getting his knee down in more ways than one as well.
Can't hope for a better way to finish the season, and now we are going to celebrate for sure.
Marc Marquez ended with a 78-point advantage over brother Alex. Bezzecchi third for Aprilia's their best position in MotoGP's overall standings. Pedro picked Pecco for fourth in the final GP of 2025. To end, we had the MotoGP awards, but one name stole the headlines: Marquez.
It's not in the schedule, but I will like my father, my mother, and Alex here.
After inviting his family to the stage, 2025 really did see that they're the fastest brothers in the world.